Tanse, Tawau, welcome everyone. Kisha Supernanitsi Katson, Miskwiti Viskai Ganuchinia, and the Chifnia. Hello, I'm Kisha Supernant, and I am director of the Institute of Prairie and Indigenous Archaeology and co-chair of the Arts Working Group on Indigenous Initiatives here at the University of Alberta, who is helping coordinate and organize this event. I'm going to begin today, as folks are joining, just acknowledging where I am situated and where the University of Alberta is situated, and that we're here on the lands of Treaty 6 and the homeland of the Métis Nation in what is called in Cree Miskwiti Waskaigan, or Beaver Hills House. This, of course, has long been a gathering place for a diverse set of Indigenous nations, including but not limited to Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Nakota, Iroquois, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, and Inuit, among others. Long been a place where people come together. And we're really happy to welcome you here to the first in a series of events that celebrate the arts, so different aspects of the fine arts here, and celebrating some of the community connections that we have through the University of Alberta. The name of the series is Opintoyak, or We Lift Each Other Up, and has been generously funded through the Cool Institute for Advanced Study and the FIRE grant through the Edmonton Heritage Council, as well as the Faculty of Arts here at the U of A. This event is being recorded and will be available for viewing shortly after the presentation. So just folks wanting to know that will be available on the website of AWGII, the Arts Working Group on Indigenous Initiatives. And also, if you have questions or comments that you want, you can use the Ask a Question function on the right side of your screen. The group that has helped coordinate this is a committee of faculty, staff, and students from the Faculty of Arts. It has primarily Indigenous representatives, although we also have some non-Indigenous colleagues on that. And I particularly want to thank the two elders and community members who work with us on AWGII for the wonderful name, Opintoyak. We help each other up, and we're really indebted to them for helping us find the right word for this particular series. I'm going to invite Ken Williams now, who's going to, of course, invite our distinguished guest today in conversation. So just a couple of notes about Ken. Ken is on AWGII. He's one of our faculty representatives, and he's an assistant professor in the Department of Drama here at the U of A, as well as a graduate of the U of A with an MFA in playwriting. He's a playwright and dramaturge, primarily focused on new play development, and has won a number of awards, such as the Saskatchewan Arts Award for Artistic Excellence. And we're really grateful for him inviting a conversation with our distinguished guest, Reneltta Arluk. So Ken, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Kisha, and thank you everyone who's joining us here today. Thank you for that welcome. I just want to give a brief sort of, more of an informal kind of introduction to Reneltta, because she and I have are artistic collaborators, but mostly we've been involved in working together in areas of where we're working within the institutions and helping alter, change, refocus institutions so they take into account Indigenous thinking, Indigenous ways of knowing, as well as reorganizing themselves so they're less of a colonizer. Let's just put it that way. And you and I had, as artists, had crossed paths many times, but we never actually got to work with each other in any kind of way. But as administrators now, you and I have we've teamed up quite a few times. And it's been really exciting to get to know you on that side of things. So I think maybe with this conversation, both as artists and artistic leaders, I guess is another way to put it. I think I would like to see how I'd like to talk about that quite a bit. So what are you doing now, Reneltta? What's in your wheelhouse?
What's in my wheelhouse? Well, I'm the director of Indigenous Arts at Banff Centre for Arts and Creativity. So I've been there. I signed my second contract with them. So I did my 3 years. I'm in for another 3. And it was formed under the TRC. So it always had an area at Banff Centre, but it was more of a sessional position that they did summer programming, leaned heavily in dance and literary arts, I think, at some point. And with the TRC Calls to Action in 2016, Banff Centre hosted a summit. And from that, their call to action was to create an all year round Indigenous arts led all arts programming, and then they did a search for a director, and that's when I applied and I got the position. So that's the big thing that I'm doing. I also still run my own theater company, AWGII Theater, which is a project-based theater company that I've had for just about 20 years. And the mandate is to do Northern Indigenous, produce, present, create Northern Indigenous work, which is still quite active. And I do mostly playwriting and directing now, but I used to do more acting.
Yeah, and the thing is too, let's like the TRC, for those who don't know, is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and they came up with 94 calls to action, and then Banff responded. But let's just talk about Banff for just a quick second. How big, how important, like, what is the size of the Banff Center of the Arts, for people who don't know?
So it's regional. It's located in Banff, Alberta, Treaty 7 territory, up in right under the nest of the sacred Sleeping Buffalo Mountain. And it's really known nationally and internationally as a multi-arts institution. So it does all of the arts, including digital media. It has an incredible archive and library system. And they do conferences, and they also do host other organizations, partner with them and work with them. But it's got like multi living spaces. It's got multi creative art spaces, performing art spaces, and it's kind of a beautiful place, quite inspiring. It's grown artists for decades. It was founded originally in the 1950s as a alternative theater space from U of A, and then it grew into its own PSI from there.
Yeah, it's a massive, and in terms of like just money. It's interesting though, but it's only recently now with you there that it's actually had an Indigenous artistic leader in for lack of a better term, a permanent position. Because up to this point, like you said, it was kind of like we just renew it every once in a while. Yeah, it's in the heart of in Treaty 7, that's a Blackfoot, that's Stoney territory. It's this is like, you can't be in Banff without being permeated by Indigenous, well, at this point, because they weren't really given their role, Indigenous artifacts. So what is it like to be an Indigenous thinker and leader in the middle of this massive, institute, which is on a problematic piece of land?
Correct. It is, it's problematic because Stoney Nakoda were, inhabited. It is a gathering place. Like Keisha shared about Treaty 6, Banff Center, Banff, Stoney Nakoda call it Nirpa, which means where water foams, and it's referencing the waterfalls that you can see coming into the town of Banff, and that's their sacred territory. And there's a lot of ceremonial spaces that are here. So you're right, it's problematic because this is the first national park of Canada, and for Canada to be able to create a national park, it had to kick out the Stoney Nakoda who were here, who are engaging with this territory. So yes, it's hyper problematic, and when we engage tourism, people want to believe the trope of indigeneity from the past with what they recognize. And I think what's hard for people to acknowledge is that you and I are very much Indigenous people. We are very much contemporary. We speak very good English, and we're not any less Indigenous than the Indigenous people that people envision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is something like, and we keep bumping into that in these other institutions, because one of the things where we first, I think, really started working together was when we were when we helped create the position in the National Arts Center for the Indigenous Theater Artistic Director.
That's right.
Yeah, and that was like, it's like moving a giant cube that is cemented into the ground, and we. I think, I might have to say, that was kind of like taking on shaking the pillars of heaven a little bit to get them to actually crank open. But it took a lot of work to get them to really rethink their own, again, what's it like to be in that position, in that land, the unceded Algonquin territory that is now called Ottawa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a multi-step process. I mean, when you look at organizations engaging with Indigenous process, it was really, I think it really kind of started with the repast. So they worked with Banff Center, National Arts Center. Mm-hmm. They had Yvette Nolan and other collaborators that they worked with, and they hosted this incredible summit on Manitoulin Island with Debajamajig. And, you know, that's where the Indigenous playwrights got to have a canon. We got to explore multi-years, generations of Indigenous playwrights in Canada, and got to speak them and hear them and talk about it, and brought in experts to talk about the histories that formed those stories. You know, it was really quite powerful. And then from there, we had that circle. And that was really challenging to how do we find space for inclusivity with multiple voices, multiple nations, multiple generations of artists. And then from there, build a little team of us. There was 5 of us. And that we built out that job description, which sounds basic, but it was very thrilling because we got to think about how we build like a nest for an artistic director to fly from and have that world. Kevin Loring in a little mess. That's
Kevin Loring in a mess. Yeah, which is really funny because considering, you know, back when you and I, because we didn't cross paths, unfortunately, when we were at the U of A, but back when we were both getting our degrees, you know, you getting your BFA in acting, being the first Indigenous woman to get it, and myself getting the first, being the first Indigenous person to get the MFA in playwriting out of that department.
Yes.
I wasn't thinking I was going to be running a place or changing or having to change the dial and the compass, the moral compass of a major institution.
No, I don't think that, you know, I always say this, I'm just a girl from the North trying to make my way in the world. And, you know, I'm born and raised in Fort Smith, born and raised in the Northwest Territories, born in Fort Smith, a community of 1,100 people. You know, my mom and dad were both 17. My mom quickly became a single mom, you know, residential school survivor. Just everything didn't lend itself for me to become an artist. And it certainly didn't lend itself for me to become like running an arts institution, like a sector of it. And so I'm grateful. And I think, you know, that just kind of shows how important our value systems that were instilled into us by our families, our grandparents, our aunties, our uncles, and our mother and father, but what we were given, the gifts to be able to kind of take our values into places where we see value. So I guess that's one way to look at it.
Yeah, because I think with, you know, with a strong grounding, because I had a very, you know, even though it's what we call politically white passing Indigenous, I had a very strong connection to my family, and they were very clear about who I was and where I belonged and what territory was mine. And you had the same kind of background, you had the same kind of like strong family values, because I know when I was graduating in 1992, that, you know, there were no Indigenous people teaching at the University of Alberta in the drama department. They're in fact, if there was any Indigenous people teaching, they were in the faculty of, or what was then called, you know, the School of Native Studies. So what was it like, you know, seeing yourself in the instructors, not seeing yourself in the institution?
That was very challenging. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I thankfully had Lorne Cardinal. You know, he was far ahead of me, but he was the first Indigenous man. And, you know, Lewis Cardinal was running the Indigenous arts departments or Indigenous department. So it was really great to have that little niche or that little nook of niche, I guess you could say, that allowed you to feel less lonely. I think the big thing. And even now, you know, Ken, we are still doing this work solo. We're still developing these things solo. So, you know, you just kind of you really have to be grounded in something that you know about yourself to be able to kind of go into these places and trust that you belong there, that you can bring things to it, and that you're still kind of alone out there doing it. And so I, you know, in some ways, being the first Indigenous woman in the BFA, you know, that was very, very hard. It was before we thought about EDA, our idea. That was before we were thinking about the importance of place. You know, everything we were taught was being brought in from other countries, other ways of thinking, and really denouncing the value of what we bring into the room. And thankfully, because of, you know, many voices, not just ours, that we're able to kind of share that, and people are starting to hear it, which I'm quite grateful for. Yeah,
because, you know, even the idea of in bringing in Indigenous language into the learning sphere was like, it was seen, I remember for myself anyway, it was seen largely as a nice, hate to say it this way, but a gimmick. Like it's or like a bauble, like oh, that's nice. Here's like handing someone a dream catcher. You know, they'd say it in whole, and it'd be nice, but it'd be like it would be something to look at, not something that was alive to them, not something that was valuable to them. I find that's been the biggest challenge I've had. You know, what is it? Have you run into the same kind of things, or have you? What are the kind of like equivalents to been for you?
Yeah, when you think about language and inclusion, you know, I'm taken over. I've officially taken over Macbeth with Pawag and Macbeth.
Yes.
I did it. I did that draft. I committed to it, and now it's like I feel like it's just super solid. And that idea that language is, you know, I've had people say, well, it's all in Cree. I'm like, it's definitely not all in Cree. So people are still trying to figure out how Indigenous language works in non-Indigenous text, or how we bring our ways of thinking and being using English and still allowing it to be centered in wisdom, Indigenous wisdom. But when we bring in language, people are like, oh, what's this? What's that? And do we need surtitles? You know, like there's still a lot of unknowing the minute we introduce Indigenous language into the arts.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, Pawag and Macbeth was a project that was started by the youth out of Frog Lake, who wanted to do Shakespeare, but then wanted to adapt it into their own. So the Frog Lake is mostly Cree community in sort of mid-eastern Alberta, and you've been working on that project for quite a while. So I know we only have a few more minutes before we start to open up to questions, but just because this was a big artistic project, I've been blown away by every iteration I've seen of it. Just like give a brief little history about, you know, about this really important.
It's really intense.
Yeah,
it's intense. Yes, I just submitted my draft to Stratford.
Yes.
So we'll see what happens. So Pawagin is Dream Spirit in Plains Cree, and that really kind of came out of, you're right, working with Frog Lake. So I was brought into Frog Lake to adapt The Tempest with their drama class, and they then, like 2 weeks before I got there, they're like, we don't know The Tempest, we don't connect to it. We are wanting to do Macbeth with using the cannibal spirit as Macbeth. I was like, oh my God, we're gonna bring these two very present creatures into the space together and see what happens. But it ended up being quite powerful. They wanted to use greed as the main theme, and we worked with young people from grade 6 to grade 12, and we called it Frog Lake language. They adapted all the language. They performed it, but the elders kind of came out. I asked the elders to come out and offered them tobacco to talk about the cannibal spirit and bring that energy into the space in a good way, because, you know, I just felt like when we think about appropriation and we think about how that creature has just been so widely used everywhere, I wanted to kind of bring it and make it stay in the community. And so elders shared stories, youth received them, youth shared stories, elders received them. So it ended up being a really positive cultural exchange. So I went, well, two negatives do make a positive. This is proven science. And so from there, I decided to really see if it could translate outside of the community. If we brought these spirits together, would it have the same positive? And it was so positive. Would it have the same positive impact? And, you know, it really has. Every single time we've done it, every time we've brought it to different communities, when we brought different actors and creatives together, it's always been a transformational experience. So that's just why it keeps living, why it keeps going. And, you know, we've gotten some beautiful support from elders and knowledge keepers to ensure that when we work with that energy, that we're all safe, that we're all protected. And so it's been so much learning about language, about protocols, about processes, playing with text, and just allowing. And when we think about Cree language, I think why it's always so transformational, it may not be the creature. It's the fact that Indigenous artists are using their language in a way that is heightened and as energetic and athletic as Shakespeare. And it really, again, it just shows how incredible our language is.
And it always gets into this question too that seems to come up quite a bit. Why do we keep doing Shakespeare? Why do we keep doing Shakespeare, right? And it's really funny because, one, you know, me as a playwright, I keep going, well, he kind of did a good thing. He did, you know, the work is good. But at the same time, you know, whether we like it or not, in Canada anyway, it's seen as a touchstone. It's seen as a standard by which you're measured as an actor.
Yeah. I hope that's not me who
The
froze.
thing with when the NAC. Oh, is it me? I'm frozen.
I don't know. Was it me or was
Did
it
I freeze
you?
there for a bit?
You're back.
Probably me, because my internet sometimes. Okay. All right. So when I was going back, let me start again. That Shakespeare is seen as a standard by which actors in Canada are measured in theater. Like, can you do it or can't, right? If you can't do it, it's seen as, okay, well, and I know that was a huge deal when the all Aboriginal King Lear happened at the National Arts Center.
Yes.
You know, that was a proving point. That was a large group of our community of Indigenous actors and of, friends, family members, for lack of another word, clan members of the theater clan, like, who could get up there and say, yeah, we can do this. And it meant something. So, that was, for me, when hearing that these young people from Frog Lake want to do this, and then turning it into what it is, because now it's at Stratford, the Shakespeare Festival of the world.
Yes.
Right. So this is how important that is. I think that's a really major milestone for us to say as artists. And I get to look at you and go, my God, you did this for us. You didn't do this for all these young people. And it's like, for us, every time there's an accomplishment like that, that's for us. We can sit there and go, yeah, we pushed the rock up another notch.
Exactly. Because the truth is, and I do say this, is the truth is that the education system doesn't encourage or grow success for Indigenous students, young people in the school system, the Alberta school system, all the school systems. They don't encourage Indigenous success. And so, especially when you're on the reserve, they have less funding support, and then they're taught they have to learn Shakespeare, 2 plays, they have to do all this work, and they don't see themselves in any of that work. And then you wonder, why is there not a success rate for Indigenous education? And it's like, well, where are they? Show me where they are. And then, and then talk to me about this conversation, and so that was also the other prime reason, is like, once it gets published, it's available in the education system. It's available for Indigenous students to see themselves in Shakespeare the way that, it should be imagined. And so that's the other side of it, is we need to see ourselves in the education system so that we can allow success.
And it's not without insight. They saw the greed spirit in Macbeth, which they could relate to and understand. And that, to me, is like, yeah, that's right. They're not without knowledge. They're not without wisdom. It was right there. They just had to read it and approach it. Yeah,
that's right.
We only have I want to give time for people to ask questions, but I will keep talking with Reneltta if no one asks a question. So I'm just going to have a slight pause here, because she's my buddy, and she and I just have tea all the time. So
it's true. It's true.
Yeah. Okay. Things are happening in Indian country in terms of just the wealth of talent we can now rely upon. I was joking with our mutual friend Drew Hayden Taylor about 15 years ago. He and I could sit down with 3 other people in the theater community, and we would know exactly what everybody was doing. We just had, because our links, our degrees of separation were so limited, were so few, I should say, because the community was so small, that we knew what everybody was doing pretty much down to the end of the year. But we had the same conversation a couple of years ago, and I said, you know what, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing, because now there's so much talented young people coming up, and they're creating. They're not picking up my plays, not picking up his plays. They're making their own work, and every year I see this brand new wealth of work coming up, and I'm really quite encouraged. Who have you seen recently that you would say, oh my God, I can't wait to see them and spread their wings even more?
Oh, well, we have to talk about Kim Harvey, right? Like that.
Yes.
One that general as well, pops into my mind immediately, is just seeing how fearless that she is as a writer. She's all over Twitter. I love following her on Twitter, Kim Harvey. And like the Kamloops was such an incredible piece of theater. But again, it's about processes and like, how are we creating our own work? What does a room look like when we bring people together? Is it, we're not doing the standard, who are our co-creators? How do we hold space? What is protocol in theater for Indigenous theater makers? So I think that's one name that's very, like, one person that I get very, very excited about. I love the work that Yolanda Bonnell is doing. I mean, I think like she's an incredible human, incredible performer, and her writing is just so fearless. And yeah, there's some such strong creators out there that are doing it the way that they want to do it, and that they know that the answer is yes for them. Whereas I think in our generation, it felt like we had to do things kind of secretly. It felt like we couldn't really tell people, or that enthusiasm or that engagement of change wasn't as there as it is now. And of course, like, that's the part of being a trailblazer is being able to kind of do that work.
Yeah, and I have to say, for people who want to learn more about Kim Harvey, buy the book, Kim Lupa. In it, she explains her philosophy of creating work from an Indigenous perspective, but also how to invite people into that community and into that circle. And she uses she talks about building the fire, and it's a brilliant, simple and clear way to create art together. And I'll let her words speak for themselves. Yeah. We do have a question in the question thing from Oliver. I worked at Banff Center several years ago. What are the engagement points between the Banff Center and researcher students from the Faculty of Arts? Can you answer that one? Is that a bigger one, or is that something you can answer for us?
How we build relation, right? Like, there's the ebbs and flows of institutional relations. But I mean, I feel like we do that, but it's just not on an MOU. I don't think they're like it's at an MOU place. But Ken, you've engaged in the Playwrights Lab with Brian Court. You've engaged with Playwrights Nest as a dramaturg. There's a lot. We did the dramaturgy gathering a number of years ago. So there's lots of engagement between UAlberta and Banff Center. I think there's lots of opportunity for crossover. And there's different ways to engage with Banff Center as a researcher through the Layton Studios or that kind of thing, and so, or self-directed. So the relationship is there. It's very supportive and collaborative, but I couldn't say that there's actually any wording that says this is a UAlberta Banff Center collaboration.
Yeah. It's kind of one of the things to kind of dig it. If you're coming from it, but there are ways to engage with the Banff Center, and it's one of those things too that I know that when I was coming up with the idea of the Indigenous Dramaturgical Center, I wasn't sure where it was going to be placed, and a lot of people were asking me, saying, like, kind of trying to gently pushing me towards, like, put it in Banff, right? And so, but you never know. We don't know how that's going to work out.
Well, I've chatted with Brian. I chatted with Brian a couple days ago.
Yep.
And that there's that huge dramaturgy conference. And so I think he's looking at how Banff Center could be involved with that. So we'll see.
Our half hour is almost up, darling.
So fast. You thought we had an hour.
I know. We can talk to you forever. I thought we had an hour. I was hoping we had an hour now.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Of course. Yeah. So, it's one of those things, like you and I, like, and so many people out there, we're all pushing, shoving, making things happen for Indigenous people. I feel like I'm like, you and I are laying stones down, and for those to follow behind us, have an easier path.
Yeah. Oh yeah, one more person, Cliff Cardinal. Oh my God, you have to talk about Cliff Cardinal.
Yes. Oh yes.
He's, he just knocked it out of the park at Crow's Theatre, and now he's going to be at Push Festival, and every work that he does, just so excellent. And so, absolutely, that other one too.
Thanks. Keisha, it's back to you. Thank you for letting us have this time.
Oh, thank both of you so much for that wonderful conversation. And just, I think the tone of it is exactly what we're kind of hoping for, which is, engaging and celebrating, building those relations. And a lot of the work of AWGII is really about how we bring this way of being and knowing into these institutional structures, these boxes attached to concrete. I really like that metaphor of, like, how do we move things that often feel immovable And so I think it was very inspiring. And of course, we're blazing the trail like for the next generations that come after us. And that's a lot of the work we're trying to do here. So thank you so much for that wonderful conversation. And to everyone who had been joining and engaging in the chat. Just wanted to let folks know this is the first in a series, and we have 3 currently planned, and we're hoping to continue the conversations as we move forward. So on February 17th at noon, we have Tanya Harnett in conversation with Rebecca Belmore, so don't miss that. It's going to be amazing. And then on the 17th of March, so a month later, we have Tanya again in conversation with Billy Ray Belcourt. So really amazing guests to have conversations with and to learn from. So we're just so delighted that you could all join us in the Opintoyak, lifting each other up, right? We lift each other up together. And we, I think, Ken, you really summarized that so wonderfully. What we do for all of us. And so thank you so much, everyone. And I want to wish you all a wonderful evening and safe travels or journeys or wherever you may be. So hi, and thanks for being here.
Hi. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Ken. He's gone. He's disappeared.
I know he's gone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Masi choki.